Traveling changes a man you know.
Hey everybody, this is Zach Sutherland with another episode of the Traveling Podcast, and I'm here with my co-host Tyler, and today we're talking about whenever you travel to a place, you may have certain expectations about the country. Maybe when you think of a place like Italy or Russia, you have certain stereotypes in mind. We're going to talk about how once you actually arrive in the country, how it could surprise you. You have certain expectations, but Italians may surprise you, Russians may surprise you, Chinese may surprise you in different ways. This is challenging sort of the stereotypes. This is the reality. This is both sides of the coin. And I wanted to kind of make a preface here that these are stories that happen to us. If anyone goes to a certain country, I'm sure you're going to have different stories. The globe that we live on is full of good and bad people. And if we tell a story about a certain country and it's a bad experience, that's just our experience. Just to kick it off, I'd like Tyler to kind of tell us in that regard about his experiences.
Okay, yeah, I think that you said it really well, that these are individual stories that maybe we'll have a different experience than you. I'm going to kind of kick it off by saying not necessarily just about the travel, but about perceptions in general, and then maybe we can go from there. I have experiences with different cultures, and each one of them surprised me. So I'm going to give the three best examples. Would be, one is Persians. You know, I haven't been to Iran, but I have a lot of experience with Persians. And, you know, the Middle East is seen in a certain way, and I found the Persians to be almost the exact opposite of what we're taught. I found them to be really hospitable, really generous, really super friendly. Whereas you hear, like, it's these are a tough regime, it's this the axis of evil. We were taught that, but I found Persians to be more Mediterranean, more like the Greek sort of culture, super, super hospitable. I don't think I've ever met a culture more welcoming than the Persians, more wanting to entertain you, wanting you to be their guest. I've never met a culture that's more happy to have you as a guest.
And
than the Persians.
just for our audience, where is Persia?
Okay, yeah. So Persians, when I talk about Persians, I'm talking about Iranians.
Mm-hmm.
They typically prefer to be called Persian, I think, because of the association with Iran, and they don't like to be seen like their regime. And that is I couldn't make it any clearer. That is exactly why they feel that way, is because they are not like their regime. The people are nothing like their regime. And then I would say second is like Italians. Like, having lived in Italy, we tend to romanticize Italians, or you get the Hollywood version of Italy, like the mafia or these debonair Latin lover kind of approach. But I have different experiences with Italians. I found it to be in some ways the exact opposite of this sort of romanticized view. There was tons of problems in Italy, tons of problems within the relationships in Italy, and how it actually is like to be with an Italian. And then the third one I would say would be like Ukrainians. I found out of all the Eastern European countries, if anybody has a reason to be cold and have a chip on their shoulder, it would be the Ukrainians. But in opposed to like the Czechs, which I found they kind of have a negative outlook on their own history, I found the Ukrainians to be the exact opposite. They were warm and welcoming, very, very proud of their history. Well, maybe not history, but very proud of their culture, like taking me out, showing me places and showing me their language, showing me their food, so eager to share who they are. And that's in direct conflict to the way I saw Ukrainians being treated as foreigners in other parts of the world that I've lived. When I lived in Prague, the Ukrainians were seen as like they were treated as low-class citizens at the foreign police. But when I went to Ukraine, they were so sophisticated and so proud and so happy to share. So all these cultures to me have surprised me, because there's always a nuance to culture.
It's really funny that you also say about Persians, well, Iranians, they prefer to be called Persian. And by the way, I have the same exact experience. I asked this one guy where he's from. He's from Iran, but he said Persia, and he lived in America. So, and it's just interesting to hear that, and it's important to talk about that. I suppose there's stereotypes about Russians. I suppose it's like every Russian drinks vodka, or like, they're tough, or they're kind of maybe not to be trusted in some ways. They maybe the women are out to get your money. These are stereotypes as well. But one interesting aspect of Russian culture, I suppose you could say, is like when taking pictures with a Russian, you'll find that they won't smile in the picture. And I always kind of looked at that as, first of all, why did they do that? Why wouldn't they smile? Just because it's so ubiquitous in American culture to smile taking a picture. Then I found out that the reason why they don't is because they don't want to reveal their like emotions, and they also kind of see it as like fake. The way they describe it to me is like, we only smile when we actually are happy. If you just put on
you don't
this
smile just to smile because you're posing for a photograph.
Yeah, and they view that as like being superficial or fake. It's kind of true. It's.
I think that, so I know exactly what you're talking about. In the Czech Republic, they say the Americký úsměv, and that means the American smile, and they're referring exactly to the way they see us smiling too much and being fake happy and disingenuous. Like when you go to a restaurant here, you're just like, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I'm here to get your order." But their opposite side is, you have to decide what kind of a society you want to live in. And I think that I knew an American guy that went over there, and he had traveled a lot, and we were actually going to do a documentary in a concentration camp. And on the way back, our Czech guide, he was complaining about Americans being like, well, we're honest over here. You know exactly what we are thinking, exactly what we're feeling. If you ask me how I'm doing, I'm going to tell you exactly how I'm doing. And the American guy brought up a point, and this guy had traveled, he lived in Brazil, and he said, well, I don't really care about your bad day. That's not why I'm asking you how is your day. And I think that the American view is, I think there's a lot of sense to what they're saying about being genuine or being fake, but there's also the other side, which is, what kind of a world do you want to live in? And do you want to see the best in people? Do you want to have an outlook of optimism and hope? Or do you want to just talk about how bad everything is? And he was saying, I don't want to hear about your bad day, because I also might be having a bad day, but I want to have a good day.
Focus on the positive sort of thing. Yeah, not dwell on the negative. I guess I
kind of tend to agree a little bit with this idea of the photographing a little bit, because maybe there's some times where you do want to pose for photograph, you want to smile, but just smile like a nonchalant way. I remember my sister came over to visit Prague, and I was hanging out with a Serbian friend of mine, and I was introducing her to him, and we took a photo together with him, and he looked at her and he said, why are you smiling like that? Nobody really smiles that way. Nobody does that. Nobody smiles this way. And she was like, kind of like, it was really disarming for her, because it didn't make any sense to her. I mean, this guy was a Serbian guy who had fled the Yugoslav war. He came to Prague to escape bombs. Yeah. So he had a reason to think that. So somewhere in the middle of all this is, how do you want to be, and where's that line between being genuine, optimistic, and being real and being honest?
That's kind of the two sides to that, where it's important to it's just important to emphasize that in general there are two ways of looking at a certain thing. It doesn't mean that the American way is necessarily all bad, or it doesn't mean that the other side is the right way either. It's just two sort of differing kind of philosophies, but it is rooted in sort of the history, our American history, and our character, as well as their history.
So for people that are listening, we should contextualize this a little bit. In the Soviet system, I don't know if it's even a Soviet thing, but there's a few things about smiling in cultural context. In some cultures, there's such thing as the happy idiot. Somebody that's smiling even though life is hard. It's like that. Like, it could be associated as being stupid. It could be associated as being like, he's smiling, and doesn't necessarily mean they're friendly or happy. It can mean they're a happy idiot. There's also the outlook of somebody that's smiling is not to be trusted, and that's the big one, I think, from the ex-Soviet sort of societies. During the Soviet era, let's say, to smile mean you might be a smiley glad hand, meaning you have an agenda, you want something. It's a fool's game. They're tricking you. They're tricking you into something, and it's not genuine, and that's dangerous. And the not being genuine in this moment is actually dangerous for your life. And there's the other side, which is holding the cards close to your chest a bit. You're not giving anything away.
Yeah.
When I was in Vancouver, I actually was about to move into a house, and the owner of the house was a Serbian lady, and her other tenant was a Russian or Ukrainian. And I remember, this is the other side of the coin for the Russian speakers out there, or people out there that believe you should not smile unless you're happy. I was trying to get to know this Russian guy, and I was trying to decide, do I want to live with this guy or not? But he gave nothing away. I couldn't tell you whether or not he was somebody that I could live with. I think that in order to build trust, and in order to understand one another, we have to give something away. We have to show some vulnerabilities. We have to show our enthusiasm. We have to show that side of ourselves so that the other person can feel comfortable with us. The Slavs tend to get to that place slower, and they get to that place by determining whether or not you're authentic, and that takes a lot of time. And the only way to know if you're going to be able to get along is to give something of yourself.
And yeah, going along with what you said about not giving away your emotions because you don't want to reveal anything to people who you don't know. For example, I would be on the subway, on the metro in St. Petersburg, looking around at all these Russians who, all very stoic, or at least, kind of looked melancholic. But
Yeah.
but I would ask them eventually, like, why don't you smile? It's for us. It's for me.
Yeah.
My smile is for me. And
That's what they would say.
and they would say that. But then to ask further, also just you have to remember, Russia was communistic for something like 70 years, around that.
Yeah,
amount of time.
Yeah, officially, I guess that would be
And that's a time when you would be told on by your neighbors about something. If you said the wrong thing,
If you put your head above the crowd, it's on a chopping block in communist societies. When I was in Prague, a producer came over, and he was doing the American thing of talking about all the things that he had achieved. And he was talking to an ex-secret police producer. He was an informant, basically, for the Czech secret police, and he came out of the communist system. And I remember the producer was kind of looking at this guy like, yeah, like, who do you think you are? But Americans talk to each other like that because we tend to think, if you do well, I do well. And therefore, I'm going to tell you all the things that I'm doing. You're going to be excited about that because that means we're getting in together. And if I'm doing well, you're going to do well. And if you're doing well, I'm going to do well. So let's talk about all the things we're doing well. Whereas this Czech guy was kind of like, I could tell the walls were up, and he was being really skeptical, because in communist societies, you don't stick your head up in any way. You don't go against the state. You don't talk about how great you are, how much better you are than that person or this other person, because that's putting your head on the chopping block. One quick thing that somebody told me once, there's two walls in relationships. For Americans, the first wall is easy to get across. You meet somebody and you immediately feel like you got a friend, and you have this feeling of, we're going to all hang out, but then they never call you, and you never actually get across the next wall. That next wall takes longer to get across, and that wall, once you get across that wall, you have a friend for life. And the person that told me this, I think, was Czech, and they said that is the American way. The Czech way is the exact opposite. The first wall is really hard to get over. The first wall, you don't feel like you have a friend. You hang out with them for 3 or 4 days. You have sushi with them. You go to a family house party, and you never feel like you know each other. You don't feel like you're that close. And you get over that wall, and then that second wall is really easy to get over. That second wall is, you just step over it and you got a friend for life. And they were saying that there's these two contradictions. The Americans have the same walls, but the first one is easy to get across. The second one takes longer. Yeah. And the Czechs is the opposite.
That's a great analogy. And I think that it definitely illustrates kind of the difference in mentality, that I feel like I've totally experienced that, having friends in America and then having friends in Russia. So, but I also, before we move on, I also wanted to tell a little story, because we are talking about things that surprised us.
Right.
And I had a student, a computer programmer, this guy who I would have one-on-one individual English lessons with. He surprised me one day in the lesson that I was teaching him. It was about what if your house was burning down, what's the one thing that you would have to take with you? And he surprised me because he said something like my CDs, Neil Young, and my weed.
That's amazing.
But just looking at the guy, he's like a Russian computer programmer, intelligent kind of. Yeah, okay, a little bit nerdy, computer programmer.
Yeah.
I just had no idea that this guy would listen to Neil Young, sit up late at night at his house, baked out of his mind, and be jamming out to Neil Young. And so that's another way that, you find people in the world that you have so much connection with. And I was like amazed that, oh, yes, you love Neil Young. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's another thing that sort of like surprised me.
That's a good point, is like the surprise. Part of the surprise is not just in the negative that takes us away from each other, but maybe the surprise in what's similar about us too, and where the common ground actually is. I mean, I hadn't even thought about that, but that is an interesting point. I remember in Italy, when I was traveling Italy when I was young, I would meet people that listened to American music, and they would ask me, "What is he singing about? What is this about? I love this song, but I have no idea what they're saying." And I had a chance to like share my culture.
That's the exciting. I think the exciting part about traveling is then you get that surprise, like, wow, you the same music that I know of, and then asking them about certain movies that we kind of treasure in the States. I remember my computer programmer students would tell me about when they first saw Star Wars.
Right.
This is communist Russia.
Right.
77, late 70s when they first saw, or maybe it was a few years later, even more so. And they were like, we were very impressed. It is great. Great film. But that's the cool thing about Star Wars and about music and movies, is that the best ones are universal.
For one example on that note is, like, I remember I met this Serbian girl I worked with on a movie, and she was so disappointed that nobody else knew or had read To Kill a Mockingbird. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And she's like, yeah, why doesn't anybody know that book on this movie? Because she was talking about American crew members, and she was a Serb, and she's like, I read that book. It's one of the most amazing books I've ever read. And I was just like, that's amazing, that you are reading American literature. I knew another Russian. She was from Tatarstan, actually, and she was a huge American literature aficionado. Like, she had read, I was like, what do you read? She's like, Dickens. She just started naming off. Wait, is Dickens?
That's British.
He's British. Sorry, no, he's British. No, it wasn't Dickens then. I think she studied American literature, though, and that's something that can surprise you as well. I mean, look at us. Like, we talk about Russian writers, just complete admiration of them, and filmmakers. So I think we're living in that kind of world now where we have a lot more common ground across the globe than perhaps differences.
Yeah. So to move on to other countries that surprised me, and I'll tell this story about my experience in China. I was there for 3 years, and my first year there, somehow I lost my wallet twice. Both of them my fault. I think both of them I was riding one of these mobikes, bike sharing things, and I wore these pair of khaki pants. And in the back left pocket where I keep my wallet, or is it the right? I'm not going to reveal that anyway. So kept coming. It kept coming out because it was a kind of a loose pocket. And I did realize that after the second time, do not wear your khaki pants whenever you're on the mobikes, because you're going to lose that wallet. So, but anyway, both times, the first time a security guard found the wallet and eventually got it back to me.
Is both times it was a security guard?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying the first time it was a security guard. The second time, like, the wallet had dropped on the street. I was going to work in the morning, And some guy found it,
Uh-huh.
and he was able to contact, because I had a business card for someone that worked in the same company. He called her, and then she eventually called me.
Uh-huh.
But she actually, she kind of doxed me on on social media over there by putting all
Looking
my
for you.
pictures.
That's hilarious.
So, but
But she got the
no
wallet
big
back
deal.
to you.
But yeah, she got the wallet back to me.
Amazing.
And then I was so appreciative, because I was like, oh my God. And that was in the morning. I still had to teach my classes. I was like, oh God, where's my wallet? I've got to I've got to cancel my whole day. I got to go find my wallet. But eventually it got back to me by noon. So then during my lunch break, I was like, I'm going to go find this guy and buy him something out of my appreciation, a fruit basket, or just something.
Yeah.
And he refused my any of the gifts. And it was amazing.
That had the exact opposite experience with Chinese people.
Yeah, well,
so this gets back to that's the nuance. I mean, that's kind of I think what we're trying to get at the heart of this. Yeah. So I mean, this goes back to your comment, which is so important, is that these are our stories. That's not necessarily an objective reality, and that's why it's so important to travel, to do it, to get away from the stereotypes, to be surprised, and to realize that sometimes maybe you're under the illusion of a culture. My experience with Chinese, I lived with a family. They were wonderful people. They were lovely people. But I did have this one experience where, getting back to the generosity of Persians, a Persian woman gave me some terme, which is this, if you ever see the Persian, there's rugs that have those beautiful patterns on it. Well, terme is this cloth that they use as decor all throughout their homes, or it's just a common fabric. Well, this woman gave me some terme, and she gave the Chinese lady some terme as well. I put the terme out on a desk, and it suddenly disappeared. Like, it was suddenly gone. I came home, and it was gone. And I loved it. It was such a special gift. And I asked the lady, I was like, "Where have you seen that terme? Like the one that she gave me?" She's like, "No, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it." And I kept kind of pressuring her. I was like, "It was right here." And then finally, she just, quote unquote, happened to find it in a closet, meaning she had taken it and tucked it away somewhere, thinking that I was never going to notice it was gone. And I don't want to be too accusatory here, because it could mean something else, but I did notice that with Chinese, they were always, in my experience with Chinese people that I had close interactions with, they were always negotiating and always sort of serious about it, but then as soon as you kind of call them out on it, they would flip. Like, I remember she was always like trying to get more money. Okay, I need another $100 this month to pay for this or that, and that you're doing, and I was like, I can't. I just can't. I just would like say, no, I can't. And then she would go from like, we have to do this, to, oh, okay, don't worry about it then. I found that with like Persians as well. Like it's a lot of negotiations. When you say I can't do it, they're like, okay, don't worry about it, and then they go back to being your friend.
They're just sort of like bluffing and bartering. I know that's a huge thing in, I would say, all of Asia, because a friend of mine, Kevin, and hopefully we'll have him on the podcast one day because he can tell a good story. He was kicked out of one of these tourist shops in Nepal because the lady said, he told me, like, I was waiting for him, and I was like, what happened? Did you buy anything? He's like, that lady over there, she kicked me out. And I'm like, what happened? And he's like, I tried to talk her down. I tried to barter with her, And he's like, he would always tell me, like, look, don't hate me. It's the game.
It's the game.
Don't hate me that I'm good at.
Yeah.
We're about done with talking about the surprising aspects. And
yes, this was an episode about surprises and contradictions and nuances within our expectations. And again, it's our own individual experiences, which is why don't believe what you're told. Go do it and go see it and go experience it, because you're always going to see two sides of the coin once you do it. But on that note, let's head it out with our tradition of doing a tongue twister or some kind of a language game with some of the cultures we've learned. We haven't had a chance for Zach to gather any that he wants to do yet, so I'm just going to end on one from me, which is an Italian one. What is it? Sopra la panca la capra campa, sotto la panca la capra crappa.
Sounds like you're going to crap somewhere. What's going on? What does that mean?
I
you
think
crapping in many toilets or what?
No. Well,
can't choose.
Well, have you ever heard? Soto? Soto? Does that sound familiar?
Han
Soto?
Han
No. Han Soto? No, that's a different movie. No. So Soto means on Soto. And the thing about Italian is you have to pronounce every letter, and that's why Italian accents sound the way they do when they speak in English. Every letter is a spoken.
There's a rhythm.
Yeah, and there's a rhythm, and every sound is enunciated. Everything that's in that word is enunciated. But that phrase means, I think it means, under the table the goat is alive, and over the table the goat is dead. Something like that. Yeah, yeah.
That one sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
I guess, but they don't have to make sense. That's the
But
great
it's
thing
more
about tongue twisters.
the way they sound, obviously.
Yeah.
Can you do it one more time?
Soda la panca la capa crapa soda la sopra la panca la capa crapa soda la panca la capa crapa. I screwed it up.
Actually, I just thought of one.
That was like 10 years ago I learned that.
I just
Sorry,
thought
out
of
there.
one.
Sorry, I want you to tell me, but just anybody out there that's listening that knows that I screwed that one up, if I did, please forgive me. It's been a long time since.
This is not a tongue twister. This is a weird German phrase for talking about beans and a certain thing that happens to one when one eats beans. Linsen bringen den Arsch zum Grinsen.
What language is that?
German, I believe.
So, yeah.
And I may be saying it wrong. This was almost 20 years ago. So Germans, please...
Take it easy on us.
No. I want you to yell at me in German if I'm getting it wrong. But Linsen bringen den Arsch zum Grinsen. Do you know what it means? Can you make a guess? Yeah. The beans that make your ass smile or grin. I don't know.
Kind of like Beans, the musical fruit. And the more you eat, the more you toot, or whatever. Yeah. So anyway, guys, that was fun. And anybody out there that has a tongue twister, please send them in and correct us if we get it, we say it wrong, or it's just a fun way to end it. And I'm sure we're gonna mess them up.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna make a tradition of messing stuff up.
All right, see you guys in the next one.
Ciao.
Traveling changes a man, for better or worse, who could say? But when I die, don't you tell them I went out this way. Tell them I said something. Yeah, tell them I said something great.